Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India Global. We'll get you the top stories from India and the region. I'm Prasar Bharati, and for news from the rest of the world, I'm joined by my colleague in London, Stuart Smith. Good to have you, Stuart.
Hi Siddharth, it's 12:30 p.m. in London and 1:30 p.m. across Central Europe. Coming up in the next 30 minutes, we go live to Tel Aviv to get the latest on the Hamas-Israel conflict and regional escalation. The man who killed 3 young girls in England has appeared in court, and our Italy correspondent explains how Venice's new tourist cap is going to work. But first, back to you for the headlines.
India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi holds bilateral talks with his Vietnam counterpart Pham Minh Chinh in New Delhi. Several MOUs signed between two nations. Israeli military confirms death of head of Hamas's military wing Mohammad Daif. India issues advisory for its citizens, asks not to travel to Lebanon. And a 17-year-old boy charged with the murder of 3 young girls in a knife attack in London. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi held bilateral talks with his Vietnam counterpart in New Delhi on Thursday. After the talks, several MOUs were signed between India and Vietnam in the presence of Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Vietnam Prime Minister at Hyderabad House. Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Vietnam Prime Minister jointly inaugurated the Army Software Park at the Telecommunications University in Nha Trang, Vietnam. A memorandum of understanding was also signed between India's public service broadcaster Prasar Bharati and Vietnam's national broadcaster Voice of Vietnam on exchange of radio and television programs in the fields of culture, education, science, entertainment, sports, history, tourism, news as areas of mutual interest subject to contractual and intellectual property laws in force in their respective countries. While delivering a joint statement with Vietnamese Prime Minister at Hyderabad House, Prime Minister Modi called Vietnam an important partner in Act East policy and Indo-Pacific vision. He stated that the two nations have good coordinations regarding the Indo-Pacific and support evolution and not expansionism.
हमारी एक्ट ईस्ट पॉलिसी और हमारे इंडो पैसिफिक विजन में वियतनाम हमारा महत्वपूर्ण पार्टनर है। इंडो पैसिफिक के बारे में हम दोनों के विचारों में अच्छा सामंजस्य है। हम विस्तारवाद नहीं, विकासवाद का समर्थन करते हैं। हम फ्री, ओपन, रूल्स बेस्ड और समृद्ध इंडो पैसिफिक के लिए अपने सहयोग को जारी रखेंगे।
Prime Minister Modi also stated that a new plan of action has been made to further strengthen our comprehensive strategic partnership.
डिफेंस और सिक्योरिटी के क्षेत्र में सहयोग के लिए नए कदम उठाए हैं। नया चांग में बने आर्मी सॉफ्टवेयर पार्क का आज उद्घाटन किया गया। $300 मिलियन की क्रेडिट लाइन पर बनी सहमति से वियतनाम की मैरीटाइम सिक्योरिटी सशक्त होगी। हमने यह भी तय किया है कि आतंकवाद और साइबर सुरक्षा इस विषयों पर सहयोग को बल दिया जाएगा।
In his address, Vietnam's Prime Minister Pham Minh Chinh lauded India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi leadership in bringing dramatic increase in Indian people living standards and more.
The leadership of the BJP and the Prime Minister have brought about great benefit to the Indian people. We are deeply impressed by the hallmark of His Executive Prime Minister, such as electricity coverage for 28 million poor households, 5G connection, social security, and a dramatic increase in people's living standard, and food security for all, including 800 million who benefit from free food. This is a result of a great effort from the Indian government and His Excellency Prime Minister personally.
Earlier in the day, Vietnamese Prime Minister met Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi at Hyderabad House in New Delhi. Prime Minister Narendra Modi welcomed his Vietnamese counterpart with warm gesture. Both the leaders held bilateral talks at Hyderabad House in the national capital. Substantive discussions to further energize the India-Vietnam Comprehensive Strategic Partnership topped the agenda. Both the leaders held wide-ranging talks and agreed to further expand the comprehensive strategic partnership between the two countries. Earlier, Prime Minister Modi received his Vietnam counterpart at the Rashtrapati Bhavan, where he received a ceremonial welcome at the forecourt of the Rashtrapati Bhavan. The visiting dignitary also inspected a guard of honor by the combined defense services. The leader also visited Rajghat and paid floral tributes to Father of the Nation, Mahatma Gandhi. Israeli military has confirmed the death of head of Hamas's military wing, Mohammad Daif. Stuart, our correspondent, is in London and gives us more on this and other stories making headlines around the world. Stuart, does it mean that now there's a possibility of this conflict getting intensified?
It's quite the possibility. The Israeli military said on Thursday that the head of Hamas's military wing, Mohammad Daif, was killed in an Israeli airstrike in Gaza last month. The Israel Defense Forces announced that on July 13th this year, military fighter jets struck an area of Khan Yunis, and following an intelligence assessment, it was confirmed that Mohammad Daif was eliminated in the strike. Daif is believed to have been one of the masterminds of Hamas's October 7th attack on southern Israel. United Nations Security Council countries on Wednesday called for restraint to avert a wider West Asia conflict after the killings of Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh and a top Hezbollah military commander. Japan's deputy UN representative Shino Mitsuku urged international forces to prevent any conflict. China, Russia, Algeria and others condemned Haniyeh's assassination, while the US, UK and France raised what they framed as Iranian support for destabilizing terror in the region. Following the death of Haniyeh, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken said that he cannot predict the impact of the Hamas leader's killing on the ceasefire agreement. However, he again asserted that the ceasefire deal would soon be reached.
I can't predict the effect, the impact of any one event on what comes next. I've learned over many years not to do that. But I think it remains manifestly the case that ceasefire is in the interest of everyone. It's in the interest of Israelis. It's in the interest of Palestinians. It's in the interest of the region. So as long as everyone is focused on what their core interests actually are, I believe that not only will we keep working to reach a deal, we will reach a deal because it is simply imperative that we do so.
DD India's Sarah Coates joins us now live from Tel Aviv. Sarah, what are we hearing from Israel on the killing of Daif?
Hello there, Stuart. Well, he has had a target on his back for a very long time. We've heard from Israel's Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. He called Daif the Osama bin Laden of Gaza. He also said that this is a significant milestone in the process of dismantling Hamas. Now, you did mention he really is seen as one of the architects of the atrocities of October 7. And the killing, the announcement of his killing comes just a day after the killing of Ismail Haniyeh. He is the head, or was the head, of Hamas's Politburo, not based in Gaza, usually residing in Doha. Now, his funeral is being held today in Tehran. That's where he was when he was assassinated. And we can tell you that his body will be then flown to Doha. So certainly a lot of risk of escalation in this area. And this is what people are very worried about, Stuart.
Sarah Coast there in Tel Aviv. Thank you for the update. Russia announced on Thursday that their troops were prepared to shoot down Ukraine's first batch of F-16 fighter jets. The Kremlin further claimed the F-16 jets will not be a panacea for Kyiv's military. On Wednesday, Lithuanian and US officials confirmed that Ukraine had received the first order of long-awaited jets. Ukraine says that the inclusion of the F-16 will be a significant addition to their air force. A 17-year-old boy charged with the murder of 3 young girls in a knife attack in the UK's Southport has been named as Axel Muganwa Rudakabuna. He was born on the 7th of August 2006. He appeared in an English court on Thursday. English law by default requires those under the age of 18 not to be named, but the judge, seemingly in this circumstances due to the severe interest in the case, has revealed his name and date of birth. Dozens of officers stood outside the courtroom after violent protests broke out across the country for a second day after this incident. More than 100 arrests were made as disorder following the attack spread to the capital, London. The 3 children died after being stabbed while they were attending a Taylor Swift-themed dance and yoga workshop, while 8 other children suffered stab wounds. Venice has introduced tough new limits on tour groups. From this day forward, there will be a cap of 25 people, and tour guides also aren't allowed to use loudspeakers. Our Italy correspondent Giles Gibson has more.
Roughly 30 million people visit Venice every single year, taking a gondola ride along the city's famous canals, or indeed checking out some of its most iconic sites, such as St. Mark's Square. But now the local authorities are cracking down on large tourist groups, which they say can block small alleys or streets or bridges within the city centre. So this 25-person cap applies to the city centre itself, as well as some of the most popular islands around Venice, including Murano, where the city's famous glass blowers are based. There are some exemptions to these rules, so children under the age of 2 don't actually count towards that 25-person cap, and also students on educational trips are not covered by these new rules. This is the latest move that we've seen from the local government in Venice to try to reduce the impact of tourism on their historic city. So in the last few years, we've seen them banning very large cruise ships from actually docking inside the city itself. That was over fears that those huge ships were actually causing damage to the city's lagoon. We've also, in the last few months, seen the local authorities introducing a small charge for day trippers coming into the city, although that policy was just a trial, and they're now trying to work out if they're going to make it a permanent measure. Now, Venice is really on the extreme end of this argument, because on certain days of the year you can actually have the numbers of tourists actually exceeding the numbers of local residents inside the city. But we have seen across Europe this summer really this growing pushback against what's described as over-tourism. Giles Gibson in Rome, reporting for DD India.
That's it from me here in London. Back to you in the studio.
Oh, thank you so much, Stuart, for these updates. Our correspondent, Stuart Smith, who joined us from London, and still to come on DD India Global. Protests are happening in Nigeria. Why? Stay tuned, we'll tell you. And we get you all the latest of what is happening in Paris Olympics 2024 and how India is making waves there.
connection between the wellness of our planet and our own well-being is more direct than we tend to believe. Let's explore more ways of helping the nature and in turn helping ourselves.
So tigers are water babies. If the forest is degraded, you will not have perennial water bodies, as in the streams will dry out and therefore you don't have tigers.
These are all valuable to our economy, but they aren't valued in our economy. Nature like this is being left out of the equation.
Litter on the street always infuriated Malarvari Muthu and her daughter-in-law Rajavalli Rajiv. They thought that people might not throw their garbage on the street if they could get money for it instead. And that's how the idea for the garbage bank was born.
You're watching DD India Global. I'm Siddharth Bharadwaj. India has advised Indian nationals against travelling to Lebanon in view of recent developments and potential threats in the region. India issues travel advisory to its nationals in Lebanon. Indian Embassy on Lebanon wrote on X that all Indian nationals are strongly advised to leave Lebanon. Those who remain for any reason are advised to exercise extreme caution and remain in constant contact with the embassy. Indian Embassy in Beirut can be reached through email ID visible on your screens or the emergency number +961 76860 128. On Thursday, Japanese parliamentary and business delegation led by Speaker of the House of Representatives of Japan, Fukushiro Nukaga, met with India's External Affairs Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar in New Delhi. The discussions focused on strengthening the Indo-Japan partnership across various sectors, including business, investments, education and technology. Both sides also addressed the critical need to build trusted, resilient and reliable supply chains, particularly in digital and emerging technologies. All right. Shops and public transport across Venezuela shut down on Wednesday as tensions continued over President Maduro's win. Amidst international pressure to ensure transparency, Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro has promised to release all the vote tallies from a disputed weekend election and said he has asked the top court to force opposition parties to do the same. Meanwhile, international pressure on the government has mounted to release full results, including from regional heavyweights, the United States and Brazil. Nigerians are taking to the streets in a protest against the high cost of food, transportation and other economic challenges, as well as what they say is bad governance. Protesters began a 10-day-long hunger protest expressing dissent at policies of fuel subsidy removal and Naira devaluation of President Tinubu. People have also expressed unhappiness over government's efforts to dissuade people from protesting. The police fired tear gas to break up a crowd of protesters in the capital, Abuja. All right, to give more inputs on this, I've been joined by DD India correspondent, Ajik Mangut. Hi, Ajik. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, he introduced reforms a year ago that aim to revive the economy. The country is struggling with soaring inflation this time. What is the latest that you're getting for us now that the protests are happening there?
Yes, indeed. When President Bola Tinubu came into office in May last year, one of the promises he made was that the price of petrol was going to become a bit cheaper once the government stops paying subsidy on imported fuel. And he announced the removal of a subsidy on imported fuel. But it is the fallout of these reforms that has led dozens of people to come out on the streets across the country to protest, saying that these reforms that were meant to better the economy have not done much. Instead, they have made things worse. They've resulted in a high cost of transportation, a high cost of fuel at the pumps. The cost has tripled since the removal of that subsidy, and that's why we're seeing hundreds of people coming out on the streets across the country to say that the government needs to ensure that its policies are friendly, have benefits for the poor masses. They're saying that whatever it is that the government is doing has not benefited them. Instead, it has increased their hardship because they have to pay more for transportation, they have to pay more for food. Inflation has gone up to nearly a 30-year high. It's at 34.2%. There's high unemployment rate, there's poverty, and so that's why a lot of them are saying that the government needs to do something to address the challenges that they are facing, because the reforms that were meant to better the economy, they say they have not done that.
All right, Ajak, thank you so much for this update. And let's take a look at other stories making news around the world. Pentagon has approved the guilty pleas of 3 convicts to conspiracy charges for the Twin Towers blast on 11th of September 2001. The suspects have been in custody since 2003. In a major step to make the country self-sufficient in rice production, rice farmers in Ivory Coast are turning to new rice variety that can adapt to all types of climates. This might be a successful step ahead for import-dependent West African country. The recent flood-hit Thessaly plain of northern Greece is suffering with deadly goat plague, threatening the livestock in the region. The government has imposed a red alert ban on the slaughter and any movement of animals to prevent further spread. New Delhi will soon be home to the world's largest museum. The new Yuge Yugin Bharat National Museum will narrate the story of India spanning across 5,000 years. The Cultural Ministry organized a State Museum Conclave in Delhi to foster collaboration among state museums and central government. More in this report.
Curators, administrators of museums and domain experts gathered in Delhi for a 3-day conclave to foster collaboration between the centre and states for the proposed Yuge Yugin Bharat National Museum project.
भारत के ऐतिहासिक वैभव को, भारत की लेगेसी को देखने के प्रति लोगों की उत्सुकता बढ़ी है। ऐसे समय में भारत के म्यूजियम्स को हम किस तरह से विश्व स्तरीय बना सकें, उनके उसमें आने वाले लोगों का एक्सपीरियंस जो है उसको अपलिफ्ट कर सकें।
The upcoming Yuge Yugin Bharat National Museum, built to be the largest museum in the world, will have 8 thematic segments telling the story of India spanning over 5,000 years.
So we want to capture that diversity as part of the Yuge Yugin Bharat Museum, and various states have very beautiful museums which have different kind of artifacts, and I think the artifacts that are there in the south, like the Chola bronzes, are very different from artifacts which are there in Kashmir, which, like say for example the Harwan tiles from Kashmir. So we are going to get all of them together as part of a collaborative effort. So the focus is on collaboration.
The conclave seeks to ensure the best global practices in museum management, conservation and collection handling. Representatives from state and union territories look to learn from this particular exchange of ideas and best practices.
We will giving presentation on the Silver Gel Memorial. It's a big memorial, and everybody knows that it is after the, when Britishers were there, that was the jail for the prisoners in India. So we will be giving presentation on that.
The State Museum Conclave marks the 3rd phase in a series of capacity-building initiatives undertaken by the GLAM division of the Ministry of Culture. Anil Thomas, DD India, New Delhi.
And Paris Olympics going on. It's a good news for India. Shooter Swapnil Kosale secured India's 3rd medal at the Paris 2024 Olympics shooting competition after finishing 3rd in men's 50-meter rifle 3 positions final at the National Shooting Centre on Thursday. The 28-year-old finished third with 195 in standing after 156.8 in the prone and 153.3 in the kneeling rounds. Swapnil had finished 7th in the qualifying round with a total score of 590, including 38 inner tens from 3 positions. Swapnil has become the first Indian shooter to win an Olympic medal in the men's 50-meter rifle 3 positions event. This is India's third shooting medal. The first medal came on Monday when Manu Bhakar claimed a bronze in the women's 10-meter air pistol event, making her the first Indian shooter to win an Olympic medal. That's all for this edition of DD India Global, but let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. For those on the go, you can get all the latest news and updates from India and across the world on the DD India mobile app. The app is available on both Android and iOS platforms. Scan the QR code on the screen to download now, and we'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Siddharth Bharadwaj from all of us here in Delhi. Thanks for watching DD India Global.